Hi, I'm Tom Lippincott, and this short video is going to cover the subject of four-note arpeggios. I'm going to show you a very simple and concise system for playing arpeggios for the various common types of chords that happen in most standards and jazz tunes. This is very important for anybody who is improvising single note lines in a jazz context because with arpeggios you can outline the sound of the harmony that you're playing over and also sound more at unity with the accompaniment. Many of you have probably, studied things like different scales to play when you're improvising, learning licks, phrases that work in an improvised setting, maybe that a master improviser played on a recording and that you've transcribed or been shown in a book or something. And these things are great resources too. I don't mean to downplay their importance, but I think that knowing the arpeggios and the chord tones basically of the chord progression that you're playing over is a really important first step, maybe even more important than learning what scale to play over what chord. Simply stated, the arpeggio or the chord tones is the chord that's being played. So there's nothing that is going to outline the actual harmony of the tune better than an arpeggio. Let's get started here. I'm going to start with the basic types of chords. In my video on shell voicings, I talked about some basic chord theory. So any of you who have a deficit in this area, I'd recommend checking that out just to get sort of the basics for how chords are constructed. So I'm going onward, assuming that everybody kind of knows how to construct a major 7 chord, a minor 7 chord, a dominant 7th chord, a half diminished chord, a fully diminished chord, and then the other 2 chords I talk about in the shell voicing video, major 6th and minor 6th chords. We won't be looking at arpeggios specifically for those 2 chords, but we'll talk about why that is in a little bit. So to get started, I'm going to use C as our basis. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find a C on the 3rd string and also on the 4th string. So for the 3rd string, I'm going to have C on the 5th fret right here. Now, as some of you may not know, you've obviously seen I'm playing an 8-string guitar. My 2 outer strings are extra strings, but the ones in the middle are all the same as a regular guitar. So this string is the same as anybody else's 3rd or G string. 5th fret is a C. So now what I'm going to do is build the chord from there. I need a major 3rd, which is going to be E, and I'm going to put that on the B string, 5th fret. I need a perfect 5th, which is G. I'll put that on the high E string. So I've got 1 note per string for the C major triad, root, 3rd, 5th. And now what I'm going to do is on the high E string, I'm going to add the 7th on the same string, up here on the 7th fret of the high E string. So I've got C, E, G, B. There's my 4-note C major 7th arpeggio. So I'm just going to kind of get to know where those notes are, memorize the shape, and then from there I'm going to build my other types of chords. So next is going to be C dominant 7, or more commonly just called C7. And the only difference between C major 7 and C7 is that the 7th of C7 is a half step lower. So the first 3 notes are the same, C, E, G, or a major triad. And then instead of B on top, I'm going to get a B flat on the 6th fret. So there's my C7 arpeggio, 4 notes. Okay, next I'm going to look for a C minor 7. I know that it's got a flat 3rd and a flat 7. So I've already got the flat 7 with the C7 chord. So all I need to do now is flat the 3rd, the E becomes E flat, and I get this shape. So there's my C minor 7. Next chord is C half diminished. I'm going to have root, flat 3rd, and instead of natural 5th, it's going to have a flat 5th, and then the flat 7 or B flat up on top. So my notes again are C, E flat, G flat, B flat. Along the way, some of the time when I was showing you these, notice that I was playing some of the notes at the same time, just to demonstrate the sounds of the triad. But when I'm actually playing these as arpeggios, part of the meaning of the term arpeggio is one note at a time. So I'm going to want to try to play the notes not ringing into each other, rather than. Okay. Then next is going to be my fully diminished 7th chord. So I'm going to start from the half diminished, and all I need to do is bring my flat 7th another half step lower. Technically that goes from B to B flat to B double flat, but in fact this note is actually much more simply just called an A. It's the 5th fret of the high E string, and so my C fully diminished chord would be C, E flat, G flat, and as a jazz and pop player would say A. A music theoretician might get kind of mad at that and say no, it's got to be B double flat, but in the jazz and pop world we're usually looking for the most streamlined, quickest way around anything that we can. Okay, so we've got major 7, dominant 7, minor 7, half diminished, and fully diminished. And we'll come back to the 6th chords a little bit later. But next thing that we're going to do is find those same 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chords with the root on the D string at the 10th fret. We had mentioned finding it from 2 different places. So now I'm going to the D string 10th fret, starting with C there, and I'm going to do the exact same format, 1 note per string for the first 3 notes, so root, and then I want E and G, and I find that on the 3rd string and 2nd string. So E is at the 9th fret, G is at the 8th fret. So I get this shape for a C major triad. Notice it's the same notes as this. Shape looks slightly different because of the tuning of the guitar. Okay, so there's root 3rd and 5th, and then I add simply the B on the same string that I played the G on, which is up here on the 12th fret, so I get this. Now, particularly on the lower frets, once we transpose this to some other keys, this might become a big stretch. Let's say I played it from F, or F sharp. Well, if I wanted to, as an alternate place to play this particular note, I could move it over to here and just play it totally 1 note per string. That would be sort of an alternate way to play that one. But for now, we'll just use this. Okay, and then to get C7, we'll take our B, lower it a half step to B flat. We get root 3rd, 5th, flat 7. Remember this shape. Now C minor 7, we lower the E to E flat. So this minor triad shape with the flat 7th on top. Next, we want the half diminished, which gives us the flat 5th in addition to the flat 3rd and flat 7th. Or C, E flat, G flat, B flat, root, flat 3rd, flat 5th, flat 7. And then finally we get the C fully diminished, C, E flat, G flat, flat 3rd, flat 5th, double flat 7th, which is that A again. I played them in both different places just to compare the two. I'll do that with each one of them. Minor 7, half diminished, major 7. So just to really get to know where those notes are in both places on the neck. And then one more thing would be converting major 7 and minor 7 to major 6 and minor 6. So let's look at C major 7 again. All I'm going to do is change my B, the 7th note of the C major scale, to A, the 6th note of the scale. And then for C minor 6, I'm going to start with a C minor 7 and change the B flat, the 7th, the flat 7th, to A again, the 6th. So I'd end up with major 6 and minor 6. And then with the root on the 4th string, Here's C6 and C minor 6. The fact is those two probably aren't as important as the other ones because they're just variations on the major and minor sounds. If you know those 5 shapes, you can play through just about any tune. Now, it's not going to sound like much at first because this is just a very first step, but I could arpeggiate the chords without anybody playing accompaniment, and the audience or the listener would probably be able to hear the chord progression of the song. For example, I'll try taking the chord progression of the song All the Things You Are and arpeggiating the chords for maybe the first couple of sections of the tune. And just for now, I'm not really going to improvise. All I'm going to do is play eighth notes on beats 1 and 2 and for each one of the chords in the tune. And so it's going to be a very regimented, nothing very creative, but hopefully you'll be able to hear the chord progression of the song. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that was the first 2 A sections, or the first half of the song. So unless you're not at all familiar with the song, I'm hoping that you could recognize the chord progressions there without anybody playing, chords behind me. I was able to convey the sound of the chord progression. Now, I'm still a far cry from playing any kind of interesting sounding melodic solo, but I've got a basis to start from. So now that I can do that, if I get a good grasp on those chords, my next step might be to try expanding on that a little bit. So the first thing that I might want to do is maybe find some of the other notes around that. So my first chord of the tune was F minor 7. I started on the 3rd string. Remember this shape? The next chord in the song was B flat minor 7. Instead of jumping down here, notice that I went to a closer place, so I didn't have to work as hard. Play that one. Now what I might want to do is find the notes around that have, find the notes that are in common between the two. I've got an A flat and an F that are in both chords. So I've got a little bit of a connection between the chords. Then the other thing that I might do is, instead of just playing root 3rd, 5th, 7th in this same octave, I could also add the 7th of the chord below the root. So I'm playing F, A flat, C, E flat, or root flat 3rd, 5th, 7th, but I'm also playing the 7th an octave lower on the 3rd string down here. And that could lead me more smoothly to, let's say, the 3rd of the B flat minor 7 chord. So I might play something like this if I'm improvising. Right? And then my next chord was an E flat 7. That's the basic shape that I was using. I went from here to here. Notice that when I play this B flat minor 7, when I get to the A flat, this flat 7th of the chord, which one of the chord tones of E flat 7 is this one real close to? It's real close to the G, or the 3rd, so that makes a really strong resolution to go down a half step. So I'll maybe try playing a little bit over those first 3 chords again. Now it's starting to sound a little bit more like music, and we can still hear the chord progression very clearly. Okay, so let's look at this E flat 7 chord. It's going to A flat major 7. I've got a couple of common tones, the E flat and the G, but I've also got this this note right here, which sounds really like it wants to go somewhere else. What it is it's a half step away from the third of the A flat major 7 chord. Now the arpeggio that I worked out for A flat major 7 has the third in this octave, but if I extend the arpeggio a couple more notes, so I play root, third, fifth, seventh, and then maybe I go from the seventh to the root an octave higher, and then maybe the third up here, then that gives me a real smooth connection to get from something like that. Or conversely, let's go back to that original E flat 7, and remember the thing that we did with the F minor 7 where we went down to the 7th. I could also do the same thing on E flat 7, add the D flat, the flat 7th an octave below, and that also leads really nicely to the third and the lower octave of, so now let's add that into the mix, the next, the A flat major chord. So again, we're starting to hear the chord progression, or we're still hearing the chord progression very clearly, but we're also moving kind of smoothly from sound to sound instead of jumping. Now eventually what you probably want to do is expand outward from these arpeggios until you get basically the whole neck. There's a couple different ways that you can approach this that I would suggest. One is to approach it across all the strings in one area. So for example, going back to that F minor 7 that we started with on the first chord of All the Things You Are, I could also go across on the lower strings. That was 7th, 5th, 3rd, root. I'm going down 7th, 5th, 3rd, root in the lower octave, and then I still have two more notes I can play, the 7th and the 5th in still a lower octave. So that gives me all of the notes in F minor 7 that are available to me around the 8th fret here. And if I do that same thing in all the other places on the neck, then I'll have F minor 7 covered pretty well all over the whole neck. Now at the same time, the guitar is kind of a bi-directional instrument. We have to play this way, like we were just doing, but we also have to play this way. So it also would make sense to find the chord tones for F minor 7 on one string at a time. And think about all the different chords that there are in the musical universe, all the different keys. There's a lot of stuff out there, and the guitar is a really complex instrument. It could take a whole lifetime just to master that one kind of, basic idea. But that's okay. That's part of the whole point of it. Is it's not the arrival, but the journey itself that is the real reward. For me, I've been playing for quite a while, and I still work on that basic stuff every day, and I see myself improving still. There's so many places to cover that I never reach the end of it, and instead of it being a frustrating thing to me, it's kind of an exciting thing, because I can see that I'm going to be having fun with this for the rest of my life very easily. So again, just to reiterate, going back to the very beginning, find those 4-note arpeggios, be able to negotiate your way through tunes using those, and then expand outward from there. Now, again, there's a whole lot more to improvising than this short video is going to be able to talk about, and this is just giving you the basis. And you might say, well, wait a minute, when I hear my favorite players improvise on tunes, it sounds like they're doing a heck of a lot more than just running up and down the chord tones of the tune or playing scales or whatever. Well, that's true, but when these master improvisers are improvising on a set of chord changes, even though they may not be explicitly stating or playing every single one of the chord tones, they know where those chord tones are. They know where that home base is, And part of the reason that they're able to so expertly create these beautiful melodies is that they've got that sort of the roots of the tree, the basis for their melodic variations they're playing, and adding all these different exotic scales and sounds and chord substitutions and so forth. All that is like the upper branches of the tree, but the core, the roots of the tree are those chord tones, and knowing where that basic stuff is. So I hope this has been some help to somebody out there, and I wish you best of luck in your musical journey, and thanks a lot for listening.